Want to go to Joe Biden's inauguration? Airbnb says, not on our platform, you're not. Hey everyone, this is Kevin, the Apptrepreneur. Welcome to my channel. And the funny thing about, I never used to like talking politics on this channel. And to a certain extent, I still don't. I always get a little nervous when I share a political opinion. But the more politics intrude on my technology sphere, if you will, and the more videos I make about it, the more, I'd say, comfortable I am becoming about talking about politics. I'm kind of in that position where, there's just going to be extremist people, and some people will just leave because they don't like what you have to say. But the thing is, I'm making the channel because I want to say what I have to say about things. So, you know what, even though I say, we rarely talk politics, going forward, we will probably be talking about politics more, as long as politics intrude on technology. And that brings us to today's story, where Airbnb has decided to cancel Washington, D.C. bookings as police warn of militia threat. Now, before we go any further, I want to clear something out. Unlike most articles that say that Airbnb is saying Trump supporters can't go to the inauguration, that's not what's going on. Airbnb, is specifically concerned about the radical Trump supporters. There are many Trump supporters that are sane, rational. They clearly don't agree with all of you out there, but you know what? They looked at what happened on Capitol Hill and said, that's not right. I have my questions about the election. I don't know if it was completely fair, but that's not how you do things. We got to let democracy prevail. And I think they're much more in the majority than they are the minority. Unfortunately, the minority tends to get talked up the most in the media, so there you go. And I think there's another reason why Airbnb is doing this. I also want to mention that I am an investor in Airbnb, so, take that for what it's worth. But here's the thing. So according to Reuters, home-sharing giant Airbnb is canceling hotel reservations in the Washington, D.C. metro area for the week of President-elect Joe Biden's inauguration after law enforcement warned of the threat from armed militia, it said on Wednesday. The decision was made voluntarily after consulting local and federal officials, a company spokesperson said. They said, "We are aware of reports emerging yesterday afternoon regarding armed militias and known hate groups that are attempting to travel and disrupt the inauguration," Airbnb said. Airbnb, which raised nearly $3.5 billion in December, of which I was one of them, in a blockbuster listing, has already banned from its platform some individuals who were found to have ties with hate groups or were involved in last week's deadly storming of the U.S. Capitol. The company will issue a full refund to guests, and hosts will be paid in full for the canceled booking. So, that's actually a pretty sweet deal if you have an Airbnb in the Washington, D.C. area and this booking was canceled. You're essentially getting paid for a service you don't even have to provide. I think a lot of us will admit that, we kind of like it when that happens. Its spokesperson declined to comment on the financial impact of its decision to cancel bookings, although it's probably not insignificant. The home-sharing company and Hotel Tonight, which it bought in 2019, are both blocking and canceling reservations. Airbnb shares were trading up nearly 7% at 12:34 p.m. Eastern Time. So here's the security threat that they're talking about. Security around the D.C. metro area has been ramped up, with the National Guard securing the Capitol. A number of local, state, and federal officials have asked people not to travel to Washington, D.C. during the inauguration week. This is just everybody in general, not just the Trump supporters. This is everyone. Some of the 10,000 National Guard troops streaming into Washington, D.C. to help secure the area ahead of the inauguration will be armed, officials have told Reuters. Facebook Incorporated said it has seen an increase in signals and indicating potential future acts of violence associated with efforts to contest the result of the presidential election since the Capitol siege last week. The coming weeks, anti-Trump activists are planning to protest hotels where Trump supporters are staying during post-election protests, And I'm going to have to say, personal opinion, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that for two reasons. One, the tensions are already high. You've seen how angry these people are. It doesn't do you any good to just anger them more. It's like, I think where most situations truly become the most violent is when you have protesters and anti-protesters. If you have a protester out there, let them say their piece, and as long as they're doing it in a peaceful way, let them be. If it gets out of hand, the National Guard and the police can take care of it. Being an anti-protester is just going to make the situation worse. Second reason should be obvious. It's because there's still a pandemic going on, and you should honestly just stay home, regardless what side you're on. So anyway, going on, Black Lives Matter DC and Shutdown DC said, we call on every hotel in DC to close completely between January 15th and 21st. In the lead up to January 6th, we ask hotels to disavow white supremacists and refuse them service. They also said the vast majority refuse and fail to prevent white supremacists from staying in our city. Well, here's the other thing. First of all, you can't just shut down the hotels completely just because a couple of activist groups want you to shut things down. I mean, there are people who need to be at the inauguration who have to be there, and where do you think they're going to stay? They're going to stay in a hotel. Of course they are. As for they should disavow white supremacists and refuse them service, they do disavow them. They do disavow white supremacists, but how do you refuse them service? I mean, do you know what information they're asking for when they sign up to rent a hotel room? They ask for a credit card and a billing address. That's it. Unless the hotels have access to FBI computers and can track down people and what they do, there's nothing to go on to ban them from using your services unless they actually tell you they're a white supremacist. You can't follow them. You can't, scour their Facebook profile. It's like hotels don't have time to do that. They just don't. Now, if they happen to catch on that there are potentially violent people staying in the hotel, they will probably do something at that point. But, they can't even commit to this because what if, the Marriott, who's actually plays a pretty big role in the rest of this article, comes forward and says, okay, we disavow white supremacists, obviously, and they will not stay at a hotel. But you don't really know, and then one day it breaks like, hey, a white supremacist posted on Instagram that they're staying at a Marriott. I guess the Marriott doesn't actually follow their own policy. The thing is, there are people who don't like renting hotels all the time, and it's not the hotel's job to hunt these people down. It's not their job to figure out what their political beliefs are before they rent them a room. They're just renting them a room, and as long as they behave themselves, they're going to stay there. But there's another reason why they're not committing to do that, and this might be the real reason why Airbnb has decided to cancel all these listings, and it's not for the reason you might think. So, major hotel chains, Hilton Worldwide Holdings, Inc., and Marriott International said it planned to uphold existing reservations. And Marriott said, our hotels in the D.C. area will remain open leading up to and through the inauguration. We, of course, have the safety of our guests and associates top of mind given the recent events. We are monitoring the situation very closely and have operational and security plans in place. And the Hyatt did not immediately respond to a request for comment. I think this actually has a lot more to do with why Airbnb is canceling these reservations and the hotels are not. And it's not because I think Airbnb hates conservatives. I don't think it's because they're singling out Trump supporters for causing trouble. I think it's because right now the threat of violence is real. And the Marriott and Hyatt, they have at the very least a certain level of protection they can offer. They have security officers. They have cameras everywhere. If someone stays at the hotel and that person gets arrested and the police want to find out if that person did anything suspicious in the hotel or met with anyone, security cameras and computer data can show if there was maybe a little gathering to plan criminal intent. But Airbnb does not have that type of resources. These are not hotels that they're renting out for the most part. These are houses. These are people's personal properties. And people, I mean, they might have a Ring camera on the front door, but they don't have a whole lot else. They don't have cameras in all the rooms. They don't have security. I mean, if a bunch of, extremists who want to cause trouble decide to rent an Airbnb and they have like a big meeting in an Airbnb house, I mean, sure, they can kind of track it on the Airbnb app, but there's no security footage to really prove it. There's, no potential witnesses to corroborate it, that they saw this person with this other person. It gets pretty dangerous. And then on top of that, you are not dealing with businesses. You're dealing with people, and people might not want their houses to be used to plan, protests that will involve violence. And are those people going to look kindly on Airbnb for not screening these people out? It's a really sensitive time right now. It's unfortunate because what happened at the Capitol should not have happened. I mean, at the very worst, the people should have marched. They should have let their voices be heard, and then they go home. Whether you believe the election was real or not, the bottom line is it happened. It's been certified. There were people who were objecting to certifying the votes. There wasn't enough anyway to make any change, but there you have it. Let the democratic process work, and you respect the results. Instead, we all know what happened. Now, I know some people are going to go into the comments below and say, well, the media was okay when Antifa and Black Lives Matter were burning down buildings. Again, do not care. Do not care. The thing is, going forward, I don't want to see it happening at all, and I think it's all equally condemnable. But Airbnb is kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. I mean, I don't think this is a freedom of speech issue. It's just right now Airbnb is still not regulated, and they know that they can be regulated any day now. And if there's any sense that they helped, some, less than scrupulous protesters rent a house and then plan a violent attack on Inauguration Day, well, that puts the homeowner and Airbnb in tough spots, and I think Airbnb is probably wise to avoid it. Your freedom of speech isn't being taken away by this. If you really want to go to the inauguration for whatever reason, hopefully it's a legal reason. Hopefully you're not going there just to cause trouble. The hotels will still be open. A little bit of a heads up, though. They will be very, very expensive, because this is just a humongous thing. I think people should just stay home because of the virus. I think it's not worth the risk either way, but hey, I leave that up to you, and I now want to ask, what do you think about this ultimately? Do you agree? Do you disagree? I would love to know. Comment below, like, favorite, share, subscribe, and as always, flame responsibly. Have a good one.